You know, the legendary mythologist Joseph Campbell once said, "What I think is that a good life is one hero journey after another." And man, that really hits right at the core of what it means to be human. It introduces this massive, epic idea that life itself isn't just some random series of events. It's actually a continuous, mythical adventure that's just waiting to be embraced. We are all called to new horizons over and over again. And the beautiful thing about all of this, you are the hero of this story. But hey, before we dive into all that grand adventure stuff, I want to speak directly to you and ask a super simple but honestly profoundly deep question. How is your now? Take a second to really look inward. Are you feeling a bit stuck, overwhelmed, or maybe you're just searching for a little more meaning? Honestly, assessing your current state is the absolute first requirement before we can officially kick off our journey. Welcome to The Explainer. So today we are unpacking a fascinating text by Thomas Alethea that acts as a highly practical, actionable roadmap for personal transformation. We're going to see how the timeless universal archetype of the hero's journey perfectly overlaps with the deeply practical psychological framework of the 12 steps. It turns out this isn't just a recovery program. It's literally a universal guide to living well and making the world a better place. So here is our treasure map for today. We'll be walking through the struggle, the threshold, the abyss, the return, and finally, the world. Let's get right into it. Okay, part one, the struggle, escaping the self-made box. We all do this, right? We kind of trap ourselves in these rigid, self-made boxes, totally clinging to the illusion of control and just crossing our fingers, hoping calamity will pass us by. This perennial struggle takes so many different forms. Maybe it's a fear of failure, an intense longing for connection, depression, anxiety, or just that endless search for meaning. And look, the goal here isn't to wave a magic wand and magically cure these universal struggles, or even pretend they don't exist. The goal is to actually learn how to swim in them rather than drown. Moving on to part two, the threshold, answering the call. So this is what we call the departure phase. It's that moment the hero finally stops avoiding reality and takes that scary step out of their comfort zone. And this perfectly illustrates the core thesis of our explainer today. On one hand, in ancient myth, the hero receives a call to adventure and crosses the threshold. And on the other hand, in the 12 steps, step 1 asks us to admit our lives are unmanageable. Boom, that's the call. Then steps 2 and 3 ask us to rely on a higher power, and that is crossing the threshold into the unknown. It is the exact same journey of transformation, we're just looking at it written in 2 different languages. Just to keep our bearings, it really helps to see the overarching structure of the hard work ahead. The narrative of both the 12 steps and the monomyth breaks down into 3 main acts: departure, where we leave our old habits behind; initiation, where we face our deepest challenges; and return, where we bring our brand new wisdom back to everyday life. Which brings us to part 3, the abyss, descent into the self. This kicks off the initiation phase, basically the spiritual labyrinth that covers steps 4 through 7. It requires taking a searching, totally fearless moral inventory and willingly confronting our own demons, which ultimately leads us to atonement. Now, what's super interesting about this is the way the text defines atonement. It literally breaks it down to at one mint, like at one. It is the ultimate heroic act. It means transcending your blind spots, facing your past mistakes head-on without any fear, and returning to the source to slay the ego. You and your shadow are no longer at war. You become at one. So how do we actually ground this abstract myth into reality? Well, we do the roll-up-your-sleeves work of steps 8 and 9. This means intentionally putting yourself in the shoes of those you've harmed. Maybe you literally write letters from their perspective to build genuine empathy. You identify your core values, list the harm you've caused, and then, and this is absolutely crucial, you go out and fix the damage wherever possible. It's all about taking total responsibility so you can rebuild your integrity from the ground up. All right, part 4, the return. Coming back transformed. So the hero has survived the abyss, right? They've returned to the ordinary world completely transformed. But honestly, the real challenge now is maintaining this new, authentic self without slipping right back into that old box. Let's see how this maps out a truly sustainable life. First, reflection ties to step 10, where we continue taking inventory and admitting when we're wrong promptly. Then meditation ties to step 11, praying for guidance to improve our conscious contact. And finally, action is step 12, going out and making the world better. The text uses a really beautiful metaphor here. It says you are watering a garden. You can't force a seed to grow, but by doing these daily habits, you create the exact environment that allows your transformation to naturally bloom. And finally, part 5, the world, the ultimate boon. Having healed themselves,
our hero now takes all that hard-won wisdom, or what Joseph Campbell loved to call the ultimate boon, and uses it to actively elevate everyone around them. And the text emphasizes something so vital here. Saving the world absolutely does not require grand, sweeping gestures or, starting some massive charity. It starts immediately with incredibly small, simple actions. Something as basic as just taking a second to smile at a stranger.
Or, get this, I absolutely love this delightfully mundane example from the text. Clean the break room microwave. Seriously, it anchors all of this lofty spiritual philosophy right down into highly practical, grounded reality. Doing the unglamorous work without even being asked, just to make a shared space better for others. That is exactly what a transformed life actually looks like in practice.
How about this one? Just listen, without interrupting, setting aside your ego, putting down that nagging, persistent need to be right, and offering someone genuine empathy is a profound, heroic act. These tiny little moments completely transform your relationships, and in turn, they transform the world immediately around you.
So, the action plan is crystal clear. You start in your immediate surroundings. You take responsibility for your space and your energy. You do good for the absolute sake of doing good, without expecting a reward, a thank you, or any recognition at all. The text describes the spiritual karma of these actions, how acting this way creates a massive ripple effect of goodwill. It aligns you with universal harmony and literally balances your accounts with reality. There's a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson that perfectly sums up the core thesis of everything we've looked at today. He said, "The purpose of life is not to be happy. It is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you have lived and lived well." True happiness isn't actually the goal. It's the byproduct. It's what happens when you step out of your box, do the hard internal work, and choose to live a life of service. Which leaves us with just one final thought to close out our explainer. You have the map. You know now that life is just one hero journey after another. The path is sitting right there in front of you. So, I challenge you to look at your life today and ask yourself, what is your next right thing? Take everything you've learned here, step over that threshold, and start your epic journey today.